Good morning. Well, Monday comes around, and before you know it, it's 10 o'clock, more or less. And that means it's time for relaxing, doing modeling stuff and painting and sanding with Dyson Dungeons. And that's what I'm going to be doing today, is continuing to work on the Savoia, because I've been making extremely slow but steady progress. As usual, if I make progress, it's pretty slow. It's not always steady. Sometimes things have to go backward. Placement, you just, live with what you got. There, get my camera guy to aim at that spot. That's going to be the spot. Try to line up with it so I get on camera when I do things. So today I'm going to continue working on the Savoia, and let's see how much I can get done. And if I finish everything I can get done before, I can't proceed until things are painted, which I can't do until other things are finished. Let's just see how it goes. I've got the inside of this painted. There's 3 coats on it, and it's looking pretty decent. And what I'll be doing today is painting metallic on the bracket here where the wings are attached. That's holding the wings on, and on the inside, I'm going to say that's metal holding it on, and the same thing in the back. And actually, at the end of the stream last week, I'm going to have to look at this through head magnifiers. I think they actually molded in like a bolted in bracket to hold the vertical stabilizer. And if they did, I might want to try to paint that, because they went through the trouble of doing it. But the 3 coats came out okay. I'm looking at it and I'm not seeing any real problems with it. So I'll be doing a little bit of painting today, a little bit of exploration, and deciding about what to do with painting on that. I've got the floats here. Let me move this all more on camera. I glued the floats together and messed one up a little bit. So there's going to be, the seams are showing. I haven't finished those. So there's going to be a lot of prep work on these guys today. These little floats. They're supposed to be seamless, and they're not. These, I can't do anything with these. This is primed. I have the wing primed. I want to take a look to see how the seams are on that, whether they need any filling or not. And I've got the ailerons primed. And if the wing and the ailerons are okay, I'm actually going to attach them. The instructions, which I'm not going to be following, the instructions say to apply the striped decals before attaching them to the wing. And that makes sense. But I'm not going to use the decals. I'm going to be painting them. I'm going to paint the stripes on. I'm getting really bold, I guess. I'll just say that. I'm going to do that. And so it makes more sense for the stripes on the ailerons to line up with the stripes on the wings if they're actually attached, because then they can just be painted as a unit. I'm going to, assuming that everything looks okay in terms of the wing and the ailerons, okay, meaning the seams aren't showing, I'm going to skip ahead to this and attach these to the wing. So this step is completed in that the 2 halves of the wings are cemented together and primed. This step is partially completed in that they are cemented together, but they're not prepped. I haven't gotten rid of the seams yet. I'm kind of skipping around a little bit. to make sure that things are working the way they should. Just to give you that, like, a heads up about what's happening and why. So I'm going to paint the metallic brackets here on the inside of this, and then when that's done, I'm going to unmask it and clean up any of the yellowish brownish paint that got. Oh, I should put a brown wash on this. I really should. It looks better with a little bit of brown wash. I'll probably do that before I unmask it. Then I'll unmask it and clean up the sides if that needs to be done. Oh. Oh yeah, green. So I've got white. I've got the red. I know I've got the red because I've used it already. And I've got a white that will work just fine. It's one of the ones that I bought for the Apollo model when I bought 5 different white colors to try to get the right ones. But I don't have a green. I found this. This is a British racing green. And thought, well, that's green. I'll test it. Let's see how that looks. And that turned out to be too dark and a little too blue. And then I thought, well, let's test this one because I also had that one. What I'm doing is opening the box and pulling out the decals. Because the alternative is to use the decals instead of paint for the stripes. But then they'll look like decals. So as I suspected, this is way too dark and too blue. This is too light and too yellow. So neither of them is really going to work. If I had to pick one, I'd probably pick that one, but I'm not going to. So in anticipation of this, I did some shopping over the weekend, and I bought 2 more greens. And I'm going to test those. I'm going to test those when I get back from my travels, because they'll have arrived by then, and see if either of the new greens comes closer to this. And if not, then what I may end up doing, and this is okay for modeling, I guess, if you just go to the hardware store and get some spray paint. You get this giant can of spray paint for less than a little can of modeling spray paint. And sometimes it works. Sometimes, if it's made to adhere to plastic, it works just fine. We actually bought a primer that way that we found works really well. And it's very inexpensive. Haven't used any of those as a finish coat, but I could see doing that. If I can't find anything else, I can buy like 6 different cans of green paint at the hardware store and test them until I find one. I'm going to end up spending like $60 to get the right green just to paint these little stripes. That's it. That's as much as it is. I would recommend not doing that if you're a frugal modeler like I am. I'm just being really exorbitant in trying to find the green here. My recommendation, though, is that if you have any skill at all, just go with an airbrush. Just absolutely do that. Then you can, I've got like 7 or 8 different green colors up here on the roundabout paint thing. And one of them is actually really close to the color I want. And with an airbrush, you just put like drops of it. It would be like hardly any of it at all to paint those little stripes. And it would be done and it would look good. But I've explained countless times, and will explain once again, that I have tried to use an airbrush. I tried to learn. I practiced. And it's just a mess. and I gave up. It was just such a mess. I just didn't even want to deal with it anymore. And so I haven't, which is probably, it's not the best thing in the world, because it's really anybody who's a serious modeler should, that's the one thing, well, there's several expensive things you should invest in. I would recommend investing in head magnifiers, like the ones I'm going to be putting on in a little while to see what's going on here on the tail section. Definitely invest in head magnifiers that you can wear and have a supplemental light. That's a really important thing. So unless your eyesight is like Superman quality, it will really help you when you're painting miniatures and small detail and things like that. But the other thing is, if you can figure out how to use it in airbrush, because then it just gives you like infinite possibilities of different colors and textures of paint, and you're not limited to what you can get in spray cans. And if you're doing any volume of modeling at all, just more than like one a year, it'll save you a huge amount of money in paint compared to a spray can. So yeah, that's the other purchase. And then, good brushes, that's important. Yeah, so the wing and the ailerons, they're under this. Leave it here. They exist. And probably shouldn't be here if I were to be messing around with paint, even though I've got a paper towel over them. And they're labeled so I can get them on the right side. So after I inspect the wing, I want to inspect it to make sure that the seam on the leading edge especially is taken care of. I'll do that a little bit later. So the wing and the ailerons, the floats, that's going to be some sanding and me complaining about how slow it is, but I don't want to go any faster because I don't want to leave scratch marks all over it. And then the inside of this, finishing this up. So I'm going to use a little bitty brush, get my little bitty brushes out, whatever's left of this one plus this one, which is still holding up. The brown wash. Use that. It really does. This is kind of a nice color, but it does look better with a little bit of wash on it. So I'm going to do that and hopefully not mess it up. Actually, I should, as I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking ahead. What I'm doing is anticipating things getting messy, right? I'm anticipating a problem. So what I'm anticipating is that okay. I'm anticipating two different things that could go wrong. One is if I paint the metal first, okay, I might have to do some touching up with the yellow because, the paint doesn't always go exactly where I intend it. And if I put the brown wash on first and then do touching up, then the touch up will cover up the brown wash and it'll look crappy. If I put the brown wash on later and it ends up looking bad, then I'll have to repaint this again with the yellow brown paint in order to, cover up the not working very well brown wash. So I'll have like 17 layers of paint on here, but I think that would be better than putting the wash on and then doing a touch up over the wash, and that would be a mess. As I'm looking at this, the other thing I'm going to paint is these are where the machine guns fire. I actually modified the model. I did a bold thing, and I drilled, I don't know if you can see that, but I drilled holes where the machine gun uh, barrels are supposed to shoot. And I think these are here just because of, you know, the way that's molded on the top. But I also think that those would be metal because bullets are going to be shooting through there. And if that was wood, it would just chew it up. If it was metal, it would just scratch up. So I'm going to paint those, the metallic and this and that. In fact, I'm going to paint these a different metallic color. This is going to be aircraft aluminum, okay? Duraluminum. But I'm going to paint those steel because when I'm thinking about it, if you had machine gun bullets shooting through these little channels and maybe not being perfectly straight but rattling around a little bit, okay, the inside of the channels I'll paint red because why not? I'll paint it red. It might not stay red after they've been shooting. And if I were really, as I'm thinking about this, if I were really, really super master modeler, I would actually paint those, the insides of that to make it look like bullets had been flying through there with, you know, and you know, some of the gunpowder residue. So they'd be like black, but they wouldn't just be pure black. It would be like smoke, gunpowder residue and bullet scratches, and it would look amazing, but I can't do that. So I'm not going to try. But I can paint these metallic. I think I'm going to paint it the steel color. Maybe dark aluminium. Steel is really dark. Well, I think I'm going to paint it one of those two colors. I'm not sure which one yet. That one. Not the one I just picked up. One of those two. But I'm going to be painting, yes, I'm going to paint the metallic first and then do any kind of touch up that I need to do and then do a brown wash. And so it's going to happen. So I'm going to, before I really get going on anything here, put my head magnifiers on and I want to see what kind of detail was molded in on the tail back here. Just keep these on as I'm painting. There's hints. You can't tell. It has to be intentional, the way they're set up, but they're not quite symmetric. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to paint the brackets. Leave the rest alone. Now, I guess it's, you know, just set my glasses down in a way to scratch the lenses, which I don't want to do. Once again, I do not have a monologue prepared. Don't have a monologue prepared for today's stream. Maybe something will come to mind. I'm not sure. The I will remind everybody now and probably multiple times during the stream that I am going on another travel. I'm going to be leaving on early Wednesday, so I will not be streaming until the earliest will be the 17th. We're scheduled to get back on the 16th, which I believe is a Sunday, which makes it theoretically possible. In theory, it's possible that I could stream on that Monday. In practical terms, given the likelihood of significant jet lag and unpacking and just travel recovery. So in practical terms, well, check in on the 17th anyway. Just check in and see if it's happening, because I might be able to. But if it gets to be like 5 after 10, because I'm usually not much later than that. If it gets to be like 5 after 10, and I haven't, and the stream hasn't started, it's not going to happen. And then it'll happen on Wednesday instead. Okay, well, the old hand. No idea if I'm on screen or not. You can't see what I'm doing because of the rotation. But try to do in just a second after I. It's not too bad. Right at the base of the tail here is where the vertical stabilizer inserts into the fuselage, and those I'm seeing those are metal brackets. I mean, they're molded in because that's how the model has to be molded. But in reality, because this is a wooden plane, wood is not, there's not light. They use wood because it was light and flexible and all that. Not hugely thick. It's not really a good support structure for something like the vertical stabilizer. That takes a lot of stresses. So it would be attached to a metal bracket that would be attached to the inside of the plane. There are also, it looks like, hints, I've mentioned this, of metal brackets on either side of this. It's like rivets that I thought about trying to paint the metallic color, but then have thought better of it. I don't know. Well, I can't say I've thought better of it. I thought alternatively to it that I just don't think I can pull it off. there. And if you're wondering why I'm concerned about the inside of the fuselage, this lifts off. This comes off of the plane, and then the interior of the fuselage, the bottom half, which is in the box of things that are finished, shows the interior detail of the inside of the fuselage. And so if you take this off, you can look inside of the inside of this. These nice clean edges here. This is going to take a million years to paint. I have to go very, very slowly. Do a lot of cleanup later. So I'm not paying attention to the chat screen. And I might not be doing much talking because I don't want to mess this up. Guess I'm going to try to get the edges, and then I'll come back and do the other side of it. As I'm doing this, I'm thinking this is one of those things where I'm thinking I must have had a good reason to want to try this. I wonder what that good reason was, because it's not being obvious to me at the moment. It'd be nice if you could see this. Delicate painting, but yeah, you can start to see it. It's coming along okay. It would be impossible without the head magnifiers. Not only does it make it bigger, but there's supplemental light in that. Those two little LEDs make a huge difference in terms of being able to see anything that's going on here. Expecting many people to show up in chat today. I'm guessing folks were, well, I don't know, a lot of people just miss a spot there. Okay. It's not what they imagined would happen in terms of touching up. It's right on the edge. It's a little bit of an edge there that might, in the future, end up being painted red, given how the taping is going to go, the masking. But at the moment, I had a problem, but I don't. Attempting to use a slightly bigger brush right now. Hit a little spot, maybe. There's a tiny dot there. Yeah, I messed that up. I was trying to fix a spot, and then the brush was at just the wrong angle. So there's tiny little spots so far that are going to require that yellowish, desert yellow touch up. So far, they're just dots, which is good. I need to get more brushes just like this one. This one like a million years ago. And it's a 10-0 sable. It's really cheap brush, I think. I'm almost certain that it was a very inexpensive brush. But boy, it's really working well. I'll get back from this trip. I might go to the local hobby store and say, hey, you got any 10-0 sables laying around? If they do, then I'll get a couple. And if they don't, then I'll probably shop online. I like buying local if possible. Support your local hobby store. Say that, and this is okay. It's coming out okay. It's just like a couple of tiny little spots that need touching up. Just little dots of paint. I'd say that came out all right. Okay, it's not too bright. It is aircraft aluminum. I mean, that's the color, so it seems like it's an appropriate color for that. Oh, we should paint the insides of these little ovals. This is where I'm going, oh, this is going okay. And then I do this and mess it up, right? It's sort of tempting to paint this whole thing metallic, but that wouldn't be authentic, really. Since that the airplane wasn't built that way. It's just the bracket that attaches the wing struts. Just this frame. Rotating it to see if there's if there. Sometimes it's important to do this just to see did I miss an entire spot, because that's a thing that can happen. Done with this color, this shade, and I'm going to then use a darker shade for the gun ports up here in the front, because those would have been, you know, those would take quite a beating from the machine guns. I think I will use steel. Well, it's a really dark shade, but I want it to be differentiated from the rest of this as well. Then I'm going to let the paint dry before I do the tiny, tiny little dots of touch up, because I don't want to just end up with the metallic paint spreading all over the place. That could happen. Use a paper towel to open and close these because see, they spatter. I learned that lesson. I've talked about paint jumping, and it does. Paint just jumps everywhere and gets in my fingers and hands in ways that are like physically impossible, but they do anyway. I just wanted to avoid that. Always see it's much darker than the other color, and the other shade of metallic. The story I'm telling here is that it has to be really tough metal because it has to withstand the heat of the machine gun fire and the rattling of the bullets. Way too much paint on the brush there. It almost slipped in my hand. If it had slipped in my hand, yeah, definitely a bunch of touching up to do. Do this part first. That turned out to actually be pretty hard to do. You know, this is where I really wish the music was back when I go silent like that. Hi, Ol. Hi, old Roger. Oh, Enforcer. Hi, everybody. Hi, Who. You all came in just as I was not paying attention because I was doing I'll be back with you in just a few moments. I am painting these little gun port things, and I was like intently paying attention to what I was doing, and I need to do that yet for just a few more minutes. And I knew that when I was doing that people would come on. And thanks for the new follow. I really appreciate that. So, Brogger, I got your video, and I just have to say that you showed me her competition video from last year. That she's actually, I mean, she was pretty good there, but she was really good in the practice video. You and she must both be really proud of the progress that she's made. So I just have to say, yeah, really pretty amazing. But I also have a question. And since your daughter is actually doing this, you might have the answer. So when a skater does a spin, and that was a really pretty impressive spin. How do they not just get sick and puke and fall all over the ice? Seriously, how in the world is someone able to spin like that? I mean, and she was spinning really fast for a long time. How is it possible to do that and not get sick dizzy or dizzy sick? But I saw that spin and she was, uh-huh. Does she have an answer? It always happens right at the end, right there. I just little dots of the brush slipped a little bit. And there's some on this part too. So I'll be touching those up with infinitesimal little dots of the yellow tan in a little while. Feels nothing. Really? She can come out of that spin? Isn't I have no idea how that's even possible. And her spins, I'm sure her spins are getting longer and more intense too. Well, so is she, you were saying that practice on ice practice is ending pretty soon? No. She's got a competition coming up that ends the season. That jump she did too was pretty nice. She really um, nailed the landing on that. I've ice skated like twice in my life, and the only point of pride I have is that I didn't fall down. I did grab onto the side of the rink, grabbed onto it a couple of times when I was going to fall down, but I didn't. But it was all I could do to go like forward and sort of make a turn. But she was just gliding, especially the backward stuff. It's really impressive. But yeah, she was really skating well. Okay, well, this metallic paint is going to dry. And then there's some little spots that you can't see without the head magnifier where I need to do some touching up. And a couple of other little spots that should have been painted the first time around and didn't get painted that I'm going to touch up just in case they don't get covered by red paint later. Right, an axle. That's the word. So she's going to do a double. Well, I know the pros, these people in the Olympics just do these insane things. Like, so when I first started watching the Olympics, when I was probably back in, oh geez, we didn't see it live. It was all taped and then shipped over, and we saw it in the evening when they, after they flew the recording of it. I think it really was tape. The pros just barely did doubles. Oh yeah. Well, once you master that, that's something else. Because I remember that the figure skating, there weren't very many of those. There were a lot more spins than there are now. But the jump spin, the axle, I do remember that the first time a triple was done, which wasn't all that long ago, that was just like a huge thing. So she can do the double. So is she going to try to put the double axel into her competition routine? Watching paint dry. While that's drying, I'm going to why not? I'm going to check out the leading edge of this wing. I spent a lot of time sanding this because it didn't come out the way I wanted it to. It's pretty good. A little bit here. Look at this through the head magnifier, but I think there's a little gap there, and I'm not sure. That is whether it's a discontinuity or whether it needs to be filled. First triple was okay. Yeah. I mean, I was old enough to really remember that was a huge deal. Check this out. I mean, that someone could do it and land it. That was 22. Right. That was just this last time around. Well, I see the flaws here. You know, there these up here, this along here. Yeah, that's actually a gap. A lot of this came out really pretty well. Tiny little gap here. This edge here has a lot of discontinuity. I'm going to fill that in. There's a gap here on the edge. And I don't think these are all just because one side is a little higher than the other. It looks like there's actually a gap. So I know it seems excessive, but I do want those. I want those to not show. So I'm going to fill those in. I can still. Oh my. The trailing edge is not good. I didn't pay much attention to it because I thought it looked okay, but it's not. Maybe putting some gap filler in all the way around, and then resand it. So is she pretty confident she's going to be able to do the double? You know, when you try for like the 15th time and it just isn't working, I hope she isn't getting frustrated. I'm going to use this this stuff because it works pretty well and it hardens. I could use a different kind of filler, but I'm going to just give this a go. I kept looking for the green putty that you talked about, and it still hasn't shown up here in the U.S. In fact, there are other things that are starting to become really hard to get. sure what's going on. You found some other stuff, some other green stuff, or another kind of filler that works also. I don't want to splatter all over that. So I'm just thinking ahead here. Safety first. You does it like UV light hardens it? Once this hardens, I'm gonna have to decide whether to reprime it or not. Nice. So it goes really quick. It sounds like the stuff they use for dental work nowadays. Yeah, I haven't gotten a filling, but I think the last time I did, when they just put this stuff in and then zapped it with some sort of light, and you had to wear a special goggles. It's the same thing, if or something really similar. Stuff that my dentist put in my mouth. Was that sold? Um, is it sold for modelers, like at hobby stores, or is it really like a specialty thing, like almost like a dental amalgam or something they have to get from a different place? I guess I'm asking, where would I look for it if I wanted to buy it? Oh, it's made like, oh, it is. Okay. I'll check out their website then. When I get back from this trip, actually, maybe I can find what I'm looking for on this trip. Yeah, I'll definitely be looking for these things because this stuff is working okay, but what you're describing sounds kind of miraculous. Done applying this filler, which is taking a long time, like everything else I do. Going to work on the pontoons. I have no idea how messy they're going to be. I had trouble with one of them. I know I made a mess with the cement, so that's going to take a while to fix. But I don't know what the seams are going to be like. Looks like I just didn't get enough cement on the trailing edge of this wing here. It's really a mess. There's just a big gap. I didn't get the cement close enough to the edge, and I didn't clamp it tight enough. So now I need to do this, as they say, fix it in post. Fix it in post. Ah, okay. Maybe I'll look for it and order it before I leave, and then it'll be here when I get back. It's looking like it's going to take 2 coats. There's a gap there, and this is pretty liquid, which is fine, but it's like they call it capillary action. It's being capillaried into the gap. Get back, I'll sand it, take a look at it, and see if it needs a reapplication or not. Right here is really bad. It's as far as miniature stuff goes, it's a pretty massive gap. It's a little bit of misalignment makes a huge difference. There's a gap here too, but that's going to be, I do believe that will be covered by the ailerons. Like it's about as good as I can get it. This go around, and as I said, after I get back and I sand it all down, take a look at it then, right? So look then. It isn't what I expected though. I expect there to be gaps like that. I haven't noticed them. That's enough messing with that. Um, as you might have guessed. Hi, Aman. Thanks for dropping in. It is moving along very slowly. Um, I was thinking, well, I'll just say that, I had primed the wing here after I glued the two parts together and did some sanding on it, and I thought I had gotten it down pretty well. No, in this case it has to be slow, just because it just has to be. But I found that there were gaps in the leading edge of the wing that I hadn't filled. I just put some filler in, and the trailing edge is really a mess. So the filler is just going to sit here now for quite some time because it isn't going to set up today. So I won't be able to sand it down today. Move the camera so people can see what's going on. I'm setting the parts here. I was thinking I could get so far as to put the ailerons in today, but that's a thing that's definitely not going to happen. It's not that far along. This filler has to set, and then I have to take a look at it, and I might have to put a second coat on when I get back. Using weapon concepts, okay. So I know she has an umbrella that puts out minions, and she has her strings. What else is there? I'm going to do the tiny bits of touch up here before, and then I'm going to start working on sanding and filing on those. There isn't much left of this, but I'm on tiny little dots. Okay. Gas attack. I'm getting some weird distortion. Yep. Tip of the bristle isn't where I think it looks. Uh, okay. That's it's like when they do underground or caving, right? Being in caves, especially if they're diving in caves. That's the technique that they use to follow their way back. If they lose their lifeline, they get lost. So I like that. I think that's pretty clever. There's some spots here. String tracking device is pretty cool. So are these things she can purchase later with the points that she gets in the game? That's assuming, of course, that the DM allows that, right? They all have to be allowed by the DM. Yeah. I mean, it does make sense that the DM would be a little bit skeptical about not only does the new ability or weapon consistent with the character that's being developed, that's important, but also is it consistent with the gameplay so far? That's the DM's job to make sure that that happens. Oh, there it is. I knew there was a little spot somewhere. That's as good as it's going to get. I'm not going to mess with it any longer. My army painter psycho brush. That's the third one I've gone through. But I've been, in what, a couple of years. It gets down to one bristle, and it makes it. Just reading the chat there. Okay, I'll let this dry, and I really do. It really would look better if I could put a really perfectly applied tiny little coat a brown wash on there. But then by putting the brown wash on, I could also make a mess of it. So I'll have to think about that before I actually do it. That is the thing I will be thinking about, is whether I think I can pull it off or not. I'd rather have it look good unwashed than to have it look bad washed. Yeah, you have to buy the big. Oh, well, that one came off and then it went flying. This is where the cement messed it up. It's all rough there, but I think I can polish that off without too much trouble. More trouble than everything else that's being a trouble. Not seeing any gaps, but the seams show. So I'll be spending most of the rest of this stream sanding down the seams on this guy. And I'll be using very fine 800. Yeah, I think I'm going to just try the using the 1500, just see how it goes. At least one of the floats tried to fly away, didn't it? And when it popped right off the end of the clothespin. Okay, I'm going to start by attempting to fix this mess I made when I got cement all over my finger and then on the model. Like this stuff here. Really old, wet, dry automotive stuff works well for polishing. So what happened was that, I got too much cement on the part, and it oozed out. And then I touched it, and then I touched the surface of the plastic, and it just distorted it. Okay, it causes a roughness on the surface. When I was a kid, when that happened, it was just like, oh, well, the side of the B-47 bomber now has a fingerprint imprinted on it permanently. That's the way it's going to be. Because I didn't have this kind of sandpaper. Polish it out. Actually, didn't even think that was a thing that could be done. Just thought that, didn't really think this, but it was just like, well, tube cement gets everywhere, filaments get everywhere. A feature of a model back then was places where the cement hit it and distorted and messed up the surface. When people who were master modelers, who were professional modelers and all that, they fixed it, but 11-year-olds didn't. Well, that just makes a lot of sense too, that if arachne has, spider-like powers, I mean, real spiders really do have many different kinds of filament, of silk. Some are adhesive, some are strong, They could have multiple things, and if she's got that, if she has that, why not build variations of it? You just have to come up with a reason why she's coming up with variations that's convincing to you and the DM. So having the strings become sort of splinter into pieces, kind of. I guess that's what you're looking at. That kind of makes sense. Get this later through the head magnifiers and get a sense of whether there's. Looks pretty good though. It looks like it came together pretty well. But there might be. I can't tell. I can't tell if that's a gap or not. My eyes are not getting better with age. Well, the strings as a, you talked about that as kind of like her initial talent is that the strings as a binding agent, crowd control sort of thing, which would be, if she was just developing her skills, would certainly be one of the very first things, right? So that makes a lot of sense. But then as she develops, she can then start to control not just like the length of the strings, but also it sounds like she's starting to control the composition of them. It's kind of an interesting development. There's continuing to be a little white line there. So at the top, the two sides did not come together. Yeah, the little white needles. Well, this is going to be a lot of work here because they didn't align perfectly. And so one side needs to come down to match the other side. Oof. Well done. I just poofed. I'm going to use a coarser grade of sandpaper here because I need to take off a lot of plastic. This is unfortunate. It is an unfortunate thing that this is happening because it's going to distort them a little bit. They're not going to be perfectly symmetric, but I can't have that discontinuity show. That's just not acceptable. Yeah, so it'd be like developing a spell slot, probably, or preparing a spell slot. If I'm trying to put it in like terms of magic in D&D. Well, I'm just going to be fiddling away with this like almost forever now, because what I was concerned about when putting these together was getting them aligned, so that the two halves were in alignment with each other, and they're not. And that creates a very obvious seam, and that needs to be just totally sanded away. And I need to do it without breaking these off. And there's that too. Um, yeah, it's usually not good for the scissors to cut sandpaper. Well, it actually doesn't hurt, I don't think. But I'm not cutting. I'm cutting so little of it, and in the long run, it isn't going to hurt. These are like little toy scissors. I mean, I think they really are. They were like a kid's toy, but they work really well for little stuff like this. So there it is. I'm using fairly coarse sandpaper on here because there's a lot of plastic to take off, which means that I'll be doing a lot of polishing later. Should use even coarser sandpaper, but I don't. Well, it makes, yeah, okay, so that there's some limit to it. Works. I'm going to be making a lot of frustration, moaning noises and stuff here because these things are going to be taking just way more sanding than I had anticipated. Um, the misalignment is fairly significant. Difficult to get to. This paper towel is a nice thing to have, but it's now in the way. I use that to cover this up. There's probably some sort of Dremel tool or something that like the equivalent of a the like they use on autos, the grinder polisher thing where you grind things down and then change the grit and the thing on the surface until you're polishing everything to a glass-like surface, right? I'm sure they make miniature ones just for this purpose. They probably cost more than the ones that they use in an auto body shop. But that's kind of what I need. Yeah, I mean, she can shrink things down and increase what she can carry, but at some point, you want to limit it. You want to intentionally limit it. So it becomes like an OP thing, an overpowered thing. It continues to be a good polishing sandpaper. What am I taking? Like 20 minutes here, and all I've got is like the nose of this, maybe close to being finished. Mm-hmm. Well, I agree. I think there has to, if she develops that skill, it does make sense that there's some limit to it. And it also makes sense that she might have to, prepare them ahead of time. I know I'm going to just break that off. It's just begging to be busted off by being ever so slightly not careful. Okay. Well, it seems to be working. Do need this grit of sandpaper. There's just too much. Wow, too much discontinuity there. I think that makes sense that she would have that kind of small item that she could carry with her. But to have it be, difficult for her to make, maybe that explains why she doesn't have very much of it. It takes a lot of energy or materials, something, so that explains why there's a limit. But it makes sense that it would be limited. Getting these little bits right in the corners there of the attachment is kind of, well, it's a good thing you can't hear what's going on upstairs. There's just all sorts of rumbling and bumbling. I think I think spring cleaning is starting a little early. Uh, yep, caught it with my fingernail again. Boy, I'm almost tempted to use. I mean, the misalignment here is so significant that I might even go to the 600 grit. This turned out to be worse than I feared, kind of, in terms of the corrective action that needs to be taken um, on the on this particular float. I haven't checked the other one, so I don't know what I'm getting into there. But this one is. So what happened was when they were cemented together, and this happens when you put two half cylinders together, is that there's a misalignment. And I thought I did the best I could when I attached them to make sure that they were aligned. But, it might have happened later with the toothpick clamps. Maybe that was a bad idea. But, with persistence, eventually it does clean up. Now I'm beginning to wonder if there's a gap there rather than I'm not sure if it's a misalignment or a gap. I don't think there's just a line there, though. It looks like the line is disappearing. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. That Arachne would, would see that kind of action and begin to wonder, is there any way I can do that also? And then, it would probably take a while to develop the skill and the materials to make it happen. So it would all have to develop as part of the narrative, wouldn't it? I think that given the persistence, it's starting. I can just start to see it disappear here. Taking a lot of abrasion now. Sorry for going quiet. I'm just dealing with the frustration of misaligned plastic parts and having to sand them down so it doesn't show. And I'm having to sand a lot of it off, which is well, disarming someone is one thing, but I mean, she's going to have to become much more developed and skilled before she can turn around and reuse them. The first time she does it, maybe she'll even surprise herself. It's like, whoa, I pulled that weapon out of their hand and it landed right in my hand. That's pretty good. Let's see what can come of that. There really has to be some sort of little miniature thing that can be used to make this work. Wonder how much one of those. No, still. Yeah, I see. It's up here. This is where it's really likely that I am going to get impatient and do something dumb. Like I'll get out a needle file and hack at it or something and leave scratch marks in it that will then take me, I don't know, a month to sand out. Or if I'd just been patient for the 10 minutes or so. Okay. Yeah, it did seem out of character for her to grab the weapon and use it like that. It would be that would be quite an event, though. You know, to have the weapon pulled out of their hand and then aimed back at them. So you're starting tomorrow, right? Um, I'm on your first session is tomorrow. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I'll be gone. So yeah, I'll be back. Right now, the plan is for us to be back on the 16th, but usually after travel like that, um, I am not at all. I'm even less coherent, right? I'm even less coherent than usual, and so there's a chance that I'll be streaming again on the 17th. It's a fairly small chance. that that Monday. But then it'll be the 19th if I have my dates correct, which I might not. Um, we're going to Berlin. Our son and daughter-in-law, at the moment at least, live in Berlin, and we're going to go visit. So, it's a pretty long plane ride. While I'm there, maybe I'll look for some green stuff putty. We're going to be doing a lot of babysitting. Or much if there's, I don't know. Well, Google works there, right? It's always Google. So where's the nearest hobby shop? Bring it back into the U.S. Looks like I've done okay. But it's then there's an issue here right in the corner, right where the sandpaper isn't done. So I'll share very carefully later. That's true. I could just do that. They probably have like overnight or 2-day delivery there. Because I know that they get packages delivered to their apartment all the time. Yeah, and just be gone for a while. I'm doing a lot of traveling lately. Just if I'm not traveling and some other family members are traveling, it's just going. Sometimes I just like to just, well, why can't we just stay at home? You know? Okay, I'm going to go back to the 600 grit. I've got the whole tail of this to do now, and this whole thing is misaligned, so I'll be doing some fairly aggressive sanding here. Yeah, this side you can see here. You can see the line. You can see how one side is lighter than the other. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I could just do that. Thanks so much. Especially now that now that it's back in stock. So what I know from here, this bit in between the two uh, attachments, is that this can be done. It just takes a lot of sanding, and it's really annoying. Run quiet again. Just I have to admit that I'm not a fan of traveling. I like being in another place. Hi, Enforcer. Thanks for dropping in. And thanks so much, Aman. Yeah, it's the process of traveling that I'm not really fond of. Just I don't care for crowds that much, and airplanes and trains are crowded, just by their nature of being that way, I guess. Just kind of bad, and just it's it isn't always pleasant. Airports. The first time I flew was a long time ago. Let's just say it wasn't quite 1970 yet. Okay. Well, I'm glad you enjoy it. Yeah, being on a train is really kind of fun, especially if you're going to areas that has really great scenery. Okay. Sometimes waiting for a train, I don't know. It's just get older. It's harder to hang the luggage. Okay, luggage is a thing. When one gets older, there's a tendency to pack more stuff. Sometimes it's stuff you have to pack. It's sort of like going back to maybe traveling with a baby, which we actually did a fair amount of back when we had babies, which was a long time ago. But I think what I don't like is, well, there's two things. One is the airport experience. Trains are really different that way. The train comes in, you get on the train, right? Sometimes you have to stand around and sit around and wait for it because you get there early and don't want to miss it. But Airplanes are a totally different matter. Airports, but it's like, am I going to miss it? We had mentioned that enforcer that you had, you cleaned up your notes by putting them all together, and in the process now you've got a big unitary mess that happens. Okay, well, by grinding away at this, eventually it comes around. I'm going to get one heck of a hand cramp here. I think taking it apart and reorganizing it into smaller units would work. That's just my opinion. I will express an opinion, but that's based on my own experience, which is that it's hard to find things when they're the, the I mean, I've got a massive amount of like just different files and stuff that I created for emails and documents and things. And when those get big enough, it's hard to find it. But within each one, it gets a little easier because there's less to go through. At least that's just how it is for me. Then at some point, you need a file of a file, right? You need to break those down into even bigger smaller subcategories. So I got the point here because I could grind that pretty easily, but now there's this pot up here. It's a little harder to reach. Thing that can be frustrating about reorganizing things is that it's like, I already did this. I've been through this all before, and now I have to do it all again. Sort of that sense of not accomplishing something because you have to undo what you've already done. That's kind of my experience anyway. But the end result is sometimes good because then you can find things again. So yes, I will be away out of the country. So I will not be streaming Wednesday, and I will be back either for a stream. Yeah, I'm losing some detail there, but that could not be avoided. Just one note either. Oh yeah, well that can happen too. Is that alternate spellings, right? You have alternate spellings in different places, and things that should be together aren't because they don't get sorted together. I guess that's a thing that can happen. Yeah, I'm getting a hand cramp. I'm going to have to take a break from this in a little while. Like maybe when I'm done with this one and do some finger stretching exercises. Why? Is there white showing here? That feeling. No, there isn't. Well, the best thing to do is just keep at it until it looks right. Jesus, that's pretty funny. Yeah, your theme is based on your physical state then. So there's this white line here. You can see it. And usually what that means is that it's one of two things. Either there's a gap that is getting filled in with sanding dust, or there's still a discontinuity and one edge is being sanded and the other one isn't. And I can't tell which that is here. I'm glad I've got this though. It's essential for polishing. And it does it pretty quickly. And when I started working on these, I thought the biggest issue would be fixing the spot where I managed to get cement all over it and make a mess. That turned out not to be the case. It turned out that the most challenging thing was that the two sides were not in alignment when they were cemented together. And so a good deal of sanding needed to be done to get them in line so that there wasn't a ridge. And I think I'm getting pretty close to getting that. Just this little bit down at the end, which is baffling me. I don't feel a problem there. This might be like the wings that it isn't going to show up until after it's primed, and then there needs to be some additional modification work done after that. I don't know. This is the top of it, so this shows. So I can't have gaps or discontinuities or edges or anything there. Fun gray, I like that. Gorgonzola Jack. That's an interesting combination. I think I'm going to leave this at the moment and wait. Really, I'm going to have to wait to see what happens after after it's primed. What was this one? This one has the same issue. They're not lined up. It's not. Yeah, it's just as bad as the other one was. How am I doing on time? Is it noon? I've got about an hour left. And I'm not sure I'll be able to finish these on this stream. Yeah. I guess I'd warned everybody that this is something that could happen here today, that prepping these floats could take a while. The thing that's taking the time isn't what I expected, though. I thought I had lined them up a lot better than I obviously had. those. Said I was going to do some hand stretches, didn't I? And then I didn't. Now I am. Hand cramps. Are there people who do that they help out? I don't know. Why not, right? Why not have people who can do that? I mean, there are people who help clean houses. There might be someone who could help organize files. Just have to, work with them carefully, because sometimes they'll organize things so it makes sense to them, but it doesn't make sense to you, and then you can't find anything. It'll be really nicely organized, but you won't be able to find anything because it's organized in a way that you don't understand, or it doesn't make sense to you. I had an assistant once, had all sorts of corporate files, old files that went back 30 years or something. And she came in and said, "Oh, I'm going to clean this up." And it was like, no, those are important historical files. Well, there are ghostwriters. Maybe there's ghost filers. When it was like, these are old, why would you keep them? Well, we're keeping them because they're old. That didn't make sense to her. We recovered it, but it was just, sometimes people, in order to be really helpful, need to understand the context of what they're doing. That's part of the orientation process, maybe. But personally, I've found, no matter how tedious it is or how much you don't want to do it, that cleaning up my own stuff works better than having someone help and maybe do it in a way that just makes it really hard to find, because the process is not the same as you would do. Great, now my other hand is cramping up. What you find is, when you're cleaning something up, well, it's kind of a weird thing going on here. It's almost like there's a lump on top of a lump. Yeah, when it gets really big, so do you just start diving into it and create categories and things as you go? You create all the framework ahead of time. Those are important questions. And if you create the framework ahead of time, how much detail you go into, because there's always exceptions. One time I was sorting things, and it's like, okay, these are the major categories of stuff, and you get them into the major categories and keep sorting and sorting. Then you go, well, this doesn't work, and then you make a new category. That's all right. But then there's always this remnant. Yeah, then you end up with a remnant of miscellaneous, and they don't fit anywhere, and you go, what? But I think that makes sense, is that you would just dive into it and create the categories as you need to, because it's hard to anticipate. Even if it's all stuff you created, sometimes it's really hard to anticipate or remember what's in it, right? And so, one thing though is it's sometimes important, as you're sorting things out, to actually keep a record, like a separate record of your bins, or your files, because those can get pretty big. I mean, that alone can be pretty big, just the files. Your index. That's the word. That's a good word, isn't it? Index. If you have a friend who's willing to help out, it can actually be a lot of fun. The interaction with your friend can be just as much a part of it as the resulting neatness of what it is that you are sorting out. Especially if they're, if as long as they're people you like spending time with and enjoying a challenge, and don't get into arguments. But if you have disagreements, you think you treat it as a fun thing to do. This needs to go in category A. No, it's a B. Oh, I know. Let's create a new one. I mean, that kind of thing. That can be a fun experience, even if it is just getting started. But it might be a good way to get going, at least. No, this feeling of discontinuity there, and there is one. It's intentional. Or not. Did I just create a notch? Did I make a notch? I shouldn't have. I don't know what I've got there, so I'm just going to get rid of it and get some fresh stuff, so I know what it is that I'm working with. your DM notes, not for active games. I mean, that would be a major metagaming issue, wouldn't it? If they saw your notes for games that were active. If it's for games that you finished, that you had already been through, then I think it might be kind of interesting and fun for them to see what you had planned for a session and what actually happened. Our DM is publishing her DM notes on our Patreon station. So we as players can see them. They're like 30 episodes ago or something. So we're not metagaming because that part of the game is already passed. But it's interesting because we find out that we behaved in a way that wasn't at all what the DM imagined, or that we missed a puzzle altogether. We can't go back, but we find out that the DM had planned something and we messed it up for her. That's kind of an interesting thing to find out because we went off on a totally different pathway. I'd recommend sharing notes of things that have been done, sessions that had already happened and not something in the future. Because I think it's more fun for the players to discover things as they go along. Even if it's frustrating for the DM when the players don't do what you think they would. But I found it interesting to I have found it interesting to read the DM notes from sessions from before. It's even just fun remembering the session. It's like, oh yeah, that's what happened. Oh yeah, that's what happened, and it wasn't supposed to have happened. Oh yeah, we really messed with the DM there. Now, even the setting notes, I think I'd recommend against it, and let the players just discover it as the game progresses. That's just my opinion. I mean, of course, you should do, your friends better, of course, than I do, and how they would react to it. But that's just my opinion. Is that as a player, I would rather discover things as they go rather than know them ahead of time. And I have enjoyed reading the DM notes from previous sessions. Now, keeping a journal during the game, two of us do that. Our changeling druid, Zoria, keeps a really good journal. I keep a slightly less accurate and timely journal. Sometimes when we read an NPC, I don't write down the NPC's name or something. And then later on, it's like, oh, we should know that. And she has it in her notes. So that makes, it makes sense in terms of gameplay too, that the player actually, not the player, but the character would keep a journal, would make maps make notes of locations of things, the names of and places of people and places, that all of that would be there. This optical stick is turning out to be just a useful thing here. I'm really not going to know how this is going to look until it's primed. That turned out to be the case with the wing, is that I thought it was better than it was. And then after it was primed, I had, kind of unpleasant surprises that required additional work. I think I've said this before, that, people who do this for real, what I mean are, the people who make the models for the box tops, or the ones who sell them, that, they're so good that they're actually able to monetize their modeling skills. They really must spend a lot of time with their parts like this, because, maybe not this much time doing this, because they'd actually get their parts aligned when they cemented them together, or they wouldn't smear cement all over the surfaces of them, so that they had to be, polished out. I'm sure that the amount of time I spend on fixing things that I messed up are things that a really good modeler wouldn't do. But it's these other things, like, getting rid of the seams and filling the gaps and stuff like that. I'm guessing that probably like 60, maybe more, maybe like 70+% of the time building a model is doing the stuff I'm doing, which is making the plastic parts. I think that you need to organize that stuff, and you might be really surprised to find what you find. There might be some things in there that you'd forgotten about, that you really you want to go back to, that you hadn't. Looking through old stuff, sometimes it's frustrating, sometimes it's illuminating, sometimes it's just great fun. And it sounds like a good way to spend some time with a friend too. Sometimes I wish I was ambidextrous. It would be nice to be able to use the other hand just as easily as this hand, rather than trying to turn the work so that it would work, and it doesn't. Yeah, I thought this was going to be cleaning off the sprue, which is back here. That needs to be sanded down. But it turned out to be a whole lot more sanding than I expected. It's coming along okay. I think for the most part I've got it done. Once I get this one done, this piece. Like I said, I'm not going to really know for sure until after it's primed. Just like with the wing. When I inspected the wing, and I thought I'd really gotten the leading edge of it well, and then I found some gaps along part of it, and then the trailing edge was just a big problem. I'm not going to say that this is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. It's not like a box of chocolates at all, but sometimes it is true One is not sure what the challenges will be until they are there. I can anticipate sometimes. I'm getting better at anticipating what the problems are going to be. And a couple of times, I think I've managed to avoid a situation where it would have been really a problem. Here, this is just taking off the sprue where it was attached to the pieces. That was persistent. I'm getting impatient with my sanding. I'm putting more pressure on, being a little less careful. This isn't necessarily a good, no, it's still a bump there. It turned out that using the 600 grit sandpaper wasn't a stupid idea, at least. It is going a lot faster, and I have been able to polish it pretty well. At least it seems like it, for the most part. So that's good. We've broken off these little support things. I haven't broken those. Now that I set it, I still have opportunity to do that. I'm going to do everything I can to not take advantage of that opportunity, because I really don't want to break them off and have to reapply them. But I was just stating that at least up to this moment, I haven't created that little bit of a disaster. Well, when I'm going on this extended trip, maybe what I can do is, come up with a file of alternative monologue topics. I'm just feeling like after years of doing this, it's been over like almost 2 years, I think. I finished the submarine almost exactly a year ago now. And that took almost a year to finish. And then I did the Apollo, and that came along. It's still not done because of one fancy thing I'm trying to do with it. Fancy thing is the control panels and making stickers, essentially sticker decals to show the detail of the control panels, which are going to be inside the command module and will be next to impossible to see anyway without disassembling the model. But that's what held it up. And I had a plan, and the plan never got executed. So close. It was like I found the thing I needed to print. I got the paper onto which it would be printed. I tested it, it was working, and then the printer ran out of yellow ink. And that issue's been fixed a long, long time ago. But it was, well, this isn't working, so let's move on to the Savoia, which I've done. And now the Savoia is, has been going on for several months now, many months. And the Apollo has, the completion of the Apollo has suffered as a result. See a line there, but I don't know if it's going to show up after it's painted. Well, this is going to be one of those things where I probably should prime them before I go, like maybe tomorrow, to get the priming done so that when I get back, I can see if they need additional work or not. Right now, I'm just saying the lines aren't disappearing the way they should. I don't feel anything there. Okay. I don't feel a discontinuity or a ridge. But it doesn't look right. Okay. Oh. Stretch my fingers. I'm going to wash these off and get as much of the dust out of them as I can. Miscellaneous sandpaper into a pile here. And then I think I will prime them. But my guess is that after I prime them, after I get back from the trip, I'm going to have to still do some manipulation on them. While I am gone, I'm going to get some green paint delivered because the green I'm painting the stripes on, not using the details. This is too dark and too blue. This is too light and too yellow. I'm hoping to get something in between these. I'll find out. I'll get that while I'm gone and test it when I get back. And then, who knows? Who knows? I'll continue to try to make some progress on this thing. I got tired. I got tired sanding. It was, well, get the isopropyl alcohol out here. You buy it by the gallon. Okay. It's way, way cheaper than buying it like in a drugstore a little bit at a time. And it has a long shelf life, right? I mean, it's not like it, think of that. So these little things here, these little stanchions, whatever they're called, these support things. I have to see if they have mold marks on them, a mold ridge. It should be really easy to fix if they do, but they actually look okay. Oddly, they do. Well, I'm either going to prime these tomorrow or I'm not. I'm just saying that it would be a good thing if I did, because then they'd be ready to go when I got back. Ready to go, meaning checked over to see if they needed some additional filling and sanding or not. they do, then I would be able to do that right away. If not, then it's like another 2 days while I get the priming done after I get back, waiting for it to dry and then getting back onto it. So I could save like an entire stream's worth of time if I remembered to prime these either later today or sometime tomorrow. So, saying that out loud, what I am going to do with a few remaining minutes while I talk about Dice and Dungeons is I'm going to get these prepared for priming. So I'm just not certain. I mean, this is a lot of effort to get these to this point, but I'm not certain that they're going to look of the same quality that I want. I'm just, getting to the point in the stream where I'm throwing things around instead of being careful about putting them away. See, if I were a master modeler, this would be a full-time job. I'd be spending 8 or 9 hours a day doing this instead of doing it for like 3 and getting tired and not being able to do any more than that. That's another difference between me and someone who's really good at that, in that stamina is lower. Just, there's little creases in these things, little indentations, and those indentations have the standing dust in them. And I'm just trying to get it out of there. So when I prime these pieces, I put them on a piece of cardboard because the spray paint blows them away, and I put a little bit of tape down, like on these, to hold them in place. So these are parts that are done, mostly done. The wing I thought was going to be done, but it required filling, so I have to sand down the leading and trailing edges. When I get back, that needs to be done. This, I think, is done. I thought about applying a wash to it, a brown wash, but I think it will mess it up. I don't want to mess it up. So when I get back, there will be an unmasking of this. I could unmask it. Maybe I'll do that yet if there's time, but I want to get these ready to be primed so I don't forget to do it before I leave, so that they're ready to go when I get back. Just getting a little piece of cardboard. Oh, stiff leg. And I use this modeling tape rather than just painter's tape because it is less likely to pull the paint off, because these need to be painted on both sides. There really isn't any way to hold them. I could hold them by like that, okay, but then that wouldn't get painted. When I paint them with the final coat of red, I'm going to have to rethink that. So this is ready to get primed, and I'm going to get the primer out and actually just stick it in my pocket. Then I'll remember it because it's in my pocket. Okay. I'm not going to put the wash on this, so as my final act today, I'm going to take the tape off. It'll probably need some cleaning up, but that'll just have to wait till I get back. I can do an unmasking. Ta-da. So far. That's the only issue. It's right there on the tip of the nose, of all places. Weird. It's sticking to my fingers. I'm getting some tweezers because I can't grab that, my fingernail there. Whoa. That is not where I expected there to be a problem. But like one place where I just thought there wouldn't be a problem is a significant mess. It came through those tiny little holes. Wow. Okay. That's kind of a shock. It's a shocking thing. I can't let that stay there because the red paint is translucent and it would and it will show. The brown paint has come through. It needs to come off. So that's something to do when I get back. There's a little spot up on the front, a little bit around the edge. Nothing, the red, I mean, tiny little spot here. And then a big blob of paint that somehow leaked through the seam there. So that's what I'm going to do when I get back is I'll clean this off. It has to be cleaned off. That little bit there and this big blob here. There's a big leak there. So that's going to take a while. I'll sand that down. And it's even got a ridge on it. Well, it's always something. And as I have seen over the last bits, the places where I thought there would be a problem, there hasn't been. And the places where I didn't think there would be any kind of problem, there has been. And that's the case here, too. I'm glad I taped it, though, because it's 90+% okay. It's just that's a problem. This little bit here's a problem, and the point on the nose is a problem. So I'll get back to those. When I finally return, which will either be on the 17th or the 19th, I believe, if I'm getting my dates right, I'm going to finish sanding down the wing and attach the ailerons, clean up the leaks of the paint on this so that they don't show through when I paint it red. All right. Test the green paints that I've got to see if one of them is going to be okay for the green stripes on the wing tips and the tail. Oh yeah, and check out these, see how much more prep they need, and if some of these things are looking like they're okay, then I can go ahead and start spray painting them red. Like the floats and the horizontal stabilizer and the fuselage, those don't have stripes, and so those can just be painted and put aside where they're, in a safe location. So there's that. So that's what will be happening. Unfortunately, it'll be like, what, 2 weeks from now, more than 2 weeks. I want to thank everybody who stuck with me, and hopefully you will all, and even more than all of you, that many of you, plus your friends and relatives and everybody else, will be back with relaxing painting, sanding, complaining, grumping, etc., with Dyson Dungeons in a couple of weeks. Again, thanks everybody. Oh yeah, Dyson Dungeons puts on a wonderful Dungeons and Dragons show that streams with a live chat on Sundays at 2, but you can catch all the old episodes on YouTube, and you should do that. We are a really good show. I mean, our DM is incredibly talented. We as players become our characters. We stay in character really well. We're pretty engaging. I need to say so myself in our show. So please do that. And then those of you who like this, enjoy the spin-off. I'll be back, like I said, maybe on the 17th or the 19th after this trip, and we'll continue working on the Savoia, and then also the maxi fig of my D&D character, also Ralph the Furbog Fighter. This needs to get painted, as does the minifig of Porco Rosso himself that came with the model. So there's stuff to do. And then at some point, believe it or not, I will get back to the Apollo, and I'm saying that sometime yet this calendar year, the Apollo will be finished. Looking forward to that as well. Thanks, everybody. Take care. That was the can of primer that I put in my pocket so I wouldn't forget it. Well, it dropped and fell on the floor. Fortunately, the nozzle seems to be intact, so I don't have to worry about losing that. It is time to quit. When things like that start happening, it's time to say, don't do anything more that would require any kind of skill at all. Thanks, everybody. I'll be back in a couple of weeks and moving along with the Savoia, and hopefully it'll start looking like an airplane soon. See you then. Bye.